All right,
Yeah,
cool.
it's a German
Yeah.
pronunciation.
Well, we're good.
Yep.
Okay,
It's
cool.
going.
Well, thanks so much for being here, Todd.
Thank you. Thanks
I
for the
appreciate
invite.
it. Yeah, I appreciate it. I had posted on Facebook a couple months ago, and I wanted to interview somebody in like the Utah politics,
Uh-huh.
and I had tried to reach out to some people from North Salt Lake who were running for city council, and nobody responded back to me.
Interesting.
It was strange. I
Yeah.
was like, hey, I think we just had what was it, midterms,
Yeah,
and I was like, well, why don't you just come talk? We'll have fun.
for sure.
and
For sure.
and then Justin mentioned you, and I think who is the other gentleman? Ray Ward, I think.
Yeah.
He's in the house.
He is in the house. He lives in Bountiful. I just live actually about a mile and a half from here. So
Oh,
I
really?
drive by here every day
Oh, wow.
on the way home from work.
Oh, that's great. So I guess let's start with what you do as a state senator,
Sure.
how you got here, and all of that.
Well, my mother said I came from heaven. Just kidding. She didn't say that. But yeah, I've been in the legislature in January. It'll be 10 years. So
Oh, wow.
so a long time. Some people would say too long. But, as a state senator, I mean, we meet in session. We're going to have a special session next month for a day or two to adopt some redistricting maps. But generally speaking, we meet for 6 weeks, 6.5 weeks in the winter. So we usually start mid-January, end of January, and then we go all the way through the month of February, and we end the first or second week of March. And so we actually just moved up our start time. We'll now be starting the day after Martin Luther King. So we'll be starting on Tuesday. I think it's the 18th of January, 2022. And so the most important thing we do during that legislative session, and we're full-time during that session, and we're part-time the rest of the year. So it's more like 1 or 2 days a month, if at all. We take some months off, like April we take off. We usually take off July or August. And then it's supposed to be 1 or 2 days a month for the rest of the year. So the most important thing we do is we pass a balanced budget. And unlike Congress on the federal level, our state constitution requires us to balance our budget. And so our budget that we pass this year will probably be in the range of $24 billion with a B. That's the most important thing we do. But in addition to that, we pass legislation. We can run bills which make or delete code from the Utah code. And then we can also run resolutions and that are non-binding. And so in addition to that, so I'm a lawmaker, and a lot of people will contact me and and I'll say, do you want me to run which new law do you want me to pass or repeal? No, I want you to do this. And constantly people are contacting me and my colleagues in the legislature wanting us to either force the executive branch to do something or to force them to stop doing something. And I'm constantly saying, and I don't mean to be condescending, but remember 5th grade? Remember those 3 branches of government? I'm in the legislative branch. I don't, the executive branch doesn't really care.
Yeah.
Well, and that's not completely true, but
Yeah.
And then of course the judicial branch is a third one. So I make laws.
Yeah.
And I help build pass a budget. Okay.
That's really great. I think we'll talk about what I'd be interested to hear some of those calls you make at the budget for sure. I interviewed at one time. He was a gubernatorial candidate for the state.
Yeah.
And that was really fun to hear him talk about.
What was his name?
Mark Smith.
Okay.
Mark A. Smith.
Okay.
Are you familiar?
I'm not.
Okay.
So
I
guess he didn't win.
No, he didn't win. I think he actually bowed out because it was like 2020. Everything was going on.
Yeah.
But he was interesting. It was a lot of fun. I mainly brought him on to talk about like sales. He's in the sales world a lot, and then found out he was a gubernatorial candidate. So we talked about that for a little bit.
Yeah, it's fun, and I was guilty of this. I've also served on the Woods Cross City Council, so I've run for office a couple of times. And the beauty of running for office when you're not in office is you can say anything you want, and you don't know any better because you don't have any. I mean, politics is, you always fake it till you make it, because I was never a city council member until I was. I was never a state legislator until I was. And so you don't really, if anybody fully appreciated what they were getting into, they probably wouldn't run, because it's a lot of work, a lot of criticism.
Yeah.
And some of it's warranted, don't get me wrong, and pretty low pay. So
Yeah, that's
relatively speaking.
Okay, fair enough. I think, what's funny is one time I was thinking, like, I had thought about it for a minute, like I might run for North Salt Lake City Council or something.
Yeah.
And I called a gentleman who I've actually had on the podcast as well. Oh my gosh, he's gonna kill me if I forget his name. And I am forgetting his name. Jensen, Matt Jensen. He was on city council. He ran against Garf.
Yeah, Melissa Garf.
Yeah.
And Matt is a great guy.
Yeah, I love Matt.
He's a great guy.
And I talked to him. I was like, hey, what is this like? What do you do? You know what I mean? And he kind of put me through just like you said, He's like, this is what you got to do. This is blah, blah. He's like, I don't know if I would do it again. He's like, I don't know if it was worth it.
Yeah. I like Matt, and he's a small business owner, which I also respect and appreciate.
Yeah, he is.
And let me just say, anybody who's willing to run for public office, hats off to them. Not everybody wins, but it's a thankless job. And unfortunately, in the 10 years that I've been in the legislature, almost 10 years, it's gotten worse. And you've seen it. With Obama and then Trump and now Biden, just our culture has gotten more toxic. And I think, due to social media and a lot of other reasons, I think more people are kind of cocooning where they only share their opinions with people that think just like them. And so, and because of that, when the legislature does something, that people, that someone doesn't agree with, they just think, we're all idiots, and they're not afraid to tell us that. And you know what, we have done some stupid things. The great thing about being in the legislature is we can always come back and fix it or revoke it. Yeah. And we do that every once in a while. So we learn. Hopefully we learn from our mistakes.
Yeah. I was going to talk about that. You get a lot of people, and I feel like a lot of the backlash that comes from, or that comes to politicians, like, I think a lot of it, I just don't know if people really know what's going on behind the scenes.
They don't. And they couldn't, right?
Sure.
It's kind of like,
yeah, I get that a little bit.
I don't even know what to compare it to, but it's kind of like when you interview for a job and you think what it's going to be like, and then you actually get in the job and you're like, this is completely different than what I thought. And let me just tell you, let me just pull back the curtain for a moment. There's 104 legislators, 75 in the House and 29 in the Senate where I serve. So 104 people. And I love to, when I do my public speaking, I always share this little tidbit. Some of them are nice and some of them aren't. Some of them are smart and some of them aren't. Some of them are hardworking and some of them aren't. And the sad reality is we are painfully reflective of our the citizens that we represent. And so if you just went to City Creek and rounded up 104 people, some of them would be smart and some of them wouldn't. And we're just like everybody else in Utah. And the other big mistake that people make is the legislature is constantly, it has a, what do you call it? A door,
a revolving door.
Yeah. And people think of us like the legislature, like it never changes. We had someone resign yesterday from the legislature. Well, he announced his resignation yesterday.
Oh, wow.
And it's not uncommon every 2 years for us to get at least 20 new legislators and sometimes 30 out of 104.
Wow.
And so
that's a big turnover.
Yeah. And I was invited to a committee meeting today on Justice Reinvested Initiative, or JRI. And we passed JRI in 2015. I'm not going to go into details, but I said in that meeting, I said, now that we're going to amend it, we need to, over half the legislators weren't here in 2015. So we need to bring them up to speed. What is JRI before we kind of take a step backwards before we can take a step forward. Yeah.
Now, because one of the things that I wanted to kind of bring up, and I'm glad that like you wanted to talk, was just like transparency in government. How do we, it feels like, like I mentioned earlier, like it feels like on social media, people are angry, but because I agree with you. Like there's been positions that I'm in, like I've been in an accounting position where it's like, look, even if I told you and I made it as plain as it could be, it would be hard to understand.
Yes.
But how do we bridge some of that gap with transparency?
So I can tell you, and COVID has been helpful in this regard.
Okay.
The legislature in 2021, the legislature has been more transparent in Utah than in any year since we were founded. Utah was founded as a state in 1896. And I'll tell you why. Because of COVID, we put so we've always, well, not always, for the past 20 years, all of our floor debates, when I say floor, I mean the Senate floor and the House floor, they have been available live. I mean, nobody rational would spend all day watching us, but some people get paid to watch us, and some people are interested. But and I say that tongue in cheek. But and then our committee hearings, which is where a lot of the work is done, the audio has been available live and it's archived. So right now, if you wanted to go to le.utah.gov, you could watch a floor debate from 2020 or from 2000. I mean, they're all there.
Oh, okay.
They're all there.
Okay.
Now, again, people have jobs, they have families to raise, they have Netflix to watch. And no, I'm not kidding myself that people are watching us. But what happened in 2021 is remarkable, because up until COVID, even after COVID started, if you wanted to testify in a hearing, now you can't go on the Senate floor and speak. Only senators can do that, and only House members can. But in committee, we always take public comment, or almost always take public comment. But up until COVID, if you wanted to speak and you lived in Logan or St. George, you'd have to drive to the Capitol, find a parking spot, which is absolutely impossible, then find the committee room, which is also impossible because there's 4 buildings, and then you have to find a seat, and then you have to get recognized to speak. It's very difficult.
Okay.
Now you can click on a Zoom link
and raise your hand.
Yeah. And you can sit at your office or sit in your home. And because we did that because of COVID, and I don't think we'll ever go backwards. Yeah. And so in terms of transparency, I mean what I say when I say 2021 is the most transparent we've ever been.
Okay, yeah, and you're meaning in the way that people can access.
Watch, they can give feedback, and every vote I take in the legislature is done in public and it's recorded. You can look up a bill without watching the video. Mm-hmm. You can look up a bill and see how I voted, which is really cool until someone running against me does that, because there's always a vote you can criticize somebody for. So I take about 1,500 votes a year.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
1,500 votes for new legislation?
Well, I mean, so in the Senate, we vote on every bill twice.
Okay.
And then we also vote in committee.
Okay.
And so, yeah, it all adds up.
So where do you think the disconnect is between, I mean, it's available.
Yeah.
And I understand people might not want to watch it, the whole thing, but I'm curious, what do you think people should do to get more involved and maybe stay educated?
So here's the thing. There's over 500 registered lobbyists, and I'm just going to tell you this because there's only 104 legislators, so we're outnumbered up there at the Capitol 5-1. So during COVID, they couldn't really approach us, which was heaven on earth.
Were you saying lobbyists in the Capitol?
Yeah. I mean,
pushing you one way or another.
The reason I bring up lobbyists is some of them are hired guns, and so they just lobby any position, whoever pays them. But a lot of the lobbyists, they lobby for an organization. So like the cosmetologists, they have a lobbyist. Okay. The home builders, they have a lobbyist. I just heard on the radio, Dave Davis was on the radio talking about food prices. So he represents the food, like the grocery stores.
Farmers and stuff or just grocery
farmers
stores.
Have a lobbyist.
Oh.
And so, so what I'm saying is lobbying, ever since Jack Abramoff 20 years ago, lobbyist has become a dirty word. But the fact of the matter is I'm just a dumb guy that lives in Woods Cross. Okay. And so I know my industry. I'm a lawyer, and I know my life's experience. But if 1 second or 1 minute in the legislature, I'm voting on some bill about the stuff that attaches to the bottom of your boat, those, I don't even know what they're called, barnacles or whatever.
Oh.
And the next session I'm doing something, the next minute I'm voting on something to do with plumbing. And the next session, it might be criminal justice reform. And we deal with hundreds of issues in a 6-week session. And there's no way that I or anyone else can be an expert on all of them. Yeah. And so if it's a farm bill, I'm probably going to listen to the farmers lobbyist. If it's a food bill, I'm going to listen to the restaurant association's lobbyist. And so they can be very helpful to bring us that subject matter expertise.
Yeah.
And I actually like to tell people they're kind of the lubricant that allows the legislative engine to run smoothly, because we just can't be experts at everything.
Yeah. Now let me ask you a question, because you bring up some of these things like cosmetology or like boats and things
My
like
wife's
that.
a cosmetologist, so that's one industry I know a little bit about.
Yeah, there you go. My wife as well.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, like it feels like, and this is where we can talk about it because I could be off base, but it feels like there's a lot of like micromanaging going on with some of these bills.
Yeah, there is with some, and there probably should be more with others. But finish your thought.
Yeah. Well, are they necessary? Like, why are we fighting, and why aren't we focusing? I mean, like barnacles, and I'm sure that was just an example, but I'm sure there's real ones that are similar to that.
Yeah.
But like, why are we voting over things like this?
So we're a growing state, and we're growing faster than some people want. So if you look at us, I mean, we've got 3.3 million people. California has, I think, 38 million people.
Yeah.
And most of them are trying to move to Utah, right? But so there's a lot of bridges we haven't crossed legislatively just because we haven't had to. So most of our legislation is either updating an existing law. So we're not creating new laws. And it always bugs me because our bills go into effect 60 days after session. So every first week of May, you'll hear some guy on the radio saying, oh, and there's 500 new bills that went into effect, or new laws that went into effect.
Yeah.
That's not actually true, because if we change the word or to and, that's a bill. If we eliminate a section of code, that's a bill. And so, most of our bills are tweaking existing statutes. So we don't repeal the murder law and pass it every year. But with technology, so like I'm just going to pick blockchain technology.
Okay.
We had to pass a couple bills because blockchain technology didn't exist in 1896 when we became a state. And so I don't know if you've heard of a drug called Spice.
Yeah.
But every year we update the chemical definition in the code of spice so that we can prosecute it. And as soon as we update the definition, then they try to change it enough so that they can't be caught or prosecuted.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it,
semantics.
Yeah. And by the way, we're always a couple steps behind technology. And so social media has brought up all kinds of issues, from defamation to, people feeling like they're being censored. So a lot of what we're doing legislatively is we're just trying to keep up with the society.
That's funny. So people come to I guess they do. I guess they come to like lawyers and stuff for like defamation on social media or censorship.
I had a call recently. Someone wanted to sue somebody for what they said on Facebook. It's a dream come true for lawyers, right?
Yeah, I'm sure.
And if anybody's listening, don't ever sue someone for defamation. It's like the dumbest thing you can do.
Is it super hard to win?
It's super hard to win, but you also, even if you win, you have to prove money damages. So like if I said something about you on Facebook that's not true, that doesn't give me $1 million, or it did give you $1 million if you sue me. You have to show how it cost you money. So unless you're fired from your job over it, you're not going to probably be able to prove any money damages. And even if you win a defamation lawsuit, you still have to pay your own attorney's fees. And so what might happen is if you win, and it's hard to win, if you win, you might get $1 and you might pay your attorney $10,000. So so again, it's a boondoggle for attorneys. I always try to tell people, this isn't like your best business decision to sue somebody for defamation. Now, sometimes you have to do
sometimes
it, right?
If
somebody is
or like a business, or something. Like if somebody says something,
you have a competitor that's just spreading damn lies and falsehoods about you. Sometimes you have to do it.
Yeah. So. Okay. That's fair. But it's just interesting. So you're saying that a lot of the bills might be just updating current code.
Yes.
Or things
probably
like
80% of them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then other things might not affect the general population. They might just affect farmers or things like that.
Well, I mean, it all affects the general population.
Okay.
It's like the pebble in the middle, you throw a pebble in the lake and you see the ripple effects.
Okay.
But, some of it directly affects people more than others. And I don't know if either of you have had teenagers.
Nope.
But
well, I take that back. My sister was a teenager.
A couple of years before I was elected to the legislature, they passed the worst law in the history of the state. And that is when a kid turns 15, he can get a driver's permit and his parents have to drive with him for 40 hours. I almost died. I have 4 kids. I almost died numerous times. I I have had my son, one of my sons drove into my neighbor's front yard and almost, I mean, just barely missed their mailbox and their tree, which is just a miracle because he had no idea what he was doing. But the legislature passed that law, and I'm being a little bit facetious and a little bit serious. We passed a law my first year that said if your teenager wants to go to a tanning salon, you have to go and sit there with them.
Why do you have to pass bills like that?
Because we had all of these 26-year-olds coming to the legislature with skin cancer all over their bodies saying, no one told me when I was 16 what I was doing to myself. And my parents were divorced. And so I'd have my mom sign a note and I'd have my dad sign a note. And then I'd go to 2 different tanning places. Because it used to be you just had to take a note from your parent. But we had adults coming to us and saying, I wish somebody would have stopped me. And here, look at this scar I have now. And so, yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, and 16-year-olds, they're not adults, right? Their brains are still developing. And so, we probably put a lot of tanning salons out of business because, some adults go tanning, but a 15-year-old girl is probably going to be a lot more interested in tanning than a 40-year-old, male. So sure. And I'm not criticizing 15-year-old girls because I was 15-year-old boy once and I liked 15-year-old girls, but you know what I'm saying? Yeah. And we don't let kids buy alcohol. So, which also can have detrimental effects, but when they're adults, it's different. So,
yeah. And I get that. Like, I guess that's where that answers my question is like some of these things I'm like, that just seems like redundant, but I get it.
And the media, by the way, the most frustrating thing to me as a legislator is there's 103 other legislators and I have no control over them.
That's fair.
And so there's always somebody in the House. I'm going to pick on the House because I'm a senator. So there's always somebody in the House that runs a really dumb bill. And the Salt Lake Tribune and, X96 on the radio, they'll just take off. And it makes all of us look dumber, by association. I can't stop them from running the bill. Yeah. All I can do is vote against it if it makes it to the Senate. But most of those bills will never get out of the House. Yeah. And a great example of this is from about 12 years ago. And I'm sorry if you're listening, Kurt Oda, but Kurt Oda, who's a friend of mine, he ran a bill. It got to be known as the feral cat bill. So his bill was, hey, we have a lot of wild feral cats up in my district, and we ought to be able to shoot them, because. Oh,
is that the billboards like "Don't kill cats"?
Yeah. And so, he ended up on the like Jimmy Kimmel making fun of it and everything else, and that bill never got any traction.
Saw the light of day.
If you read the Salt Lake Tribune that legislative session, all you would have read about was like 14 stories about the feral cat bill, which was never a thing. It was never going to pass. Meanwhile, they're passing, billion-dollar budgets that nobody's paying attention to. So the media loves to take a couple corny ideas and just blow them out of proportion.
Yeah, well, the media and especially the Salt Lake Tribune, they're just all salesmen. I would know.
Well, and their job is to sell papers, and they're, and if they were better at it, they would probably still be printing a paper instead of just being online. But they have a job to do, and I totally respect that. Senate president just tried to call me, and I blew him off for your podcast.
Hey, all right. Right on. Okay, that's cool. So how did you end up getting into politics?
So, and I literally ran for senator of my 3rd grade because in my grade school, I grew up in Illinois.
Nice. What part of Illinois?
Crystal Lake. Crystal. It was in Crystal Lake, Illinois, which is northwest of Chicago. Yeah, about 40 miles. So I just was born with this, Lady Gaga. I was born this way, baby. I've always been interested in politics. And so I remember when I was 9 years old, Jimmy Carter was up for election, 1976 or so. Yeah. And I remember, it was, of course, election days on a Tuesday. And so my parents put me to bed and I pretended like I was asleep. And when everything was quiet, I snuck down in the basement and I turned on the TV, shut the door so nobody could hear me because our bedrooms were upstairs in my house. And I watched the election returns come in until the TV stations went off the air. And for you millennials listening, yes, the TV stations used to go off the air. I mean, 9 years old, I was that invested in the presidential election. So I was a weird kid is what I'm telling you. Yeah. And now I'm just a little bit of a weird adult. So I've always had this political bug. And, some people golf, some people hunt, some people fish. I do politics. It's my favorite hobby. So
right on.
It's also my favorite sport.
Yeah. Favorite sport.
Yeah. It is a sport, right?
All
We have our
right.
teams,
Yeah,
right?
you got teams. You got to work.
You have
Yeah.
wins and losses, and there's always next year.
Right. So, okay. So what are some of the biggest things? Like, I have some things in my mind that I'd love to talk about, but I just want to hear what you're thinking
Sure.
about. What are some of the biggest things that are like affecting Utah? I mean, obviously you represent Davis County District.
South Davis County.
South
and I also
Davis
have
County.
Rose Park. So I have part of Salt Lake County as
Oh,
well.
wow. Okay.
My district crosses the boundary. So about
Okay.
10% of my district is in Rose Park.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, we could go on the rest of the time. The biggest issues affecting the state is always education, because we have like 600,000 children, right?
Yeah.
Air quality is right up there. Transportation, because we're growing so fast. So those three
Okay.
are always important. And then you have other things that kind of come and go. But right now, redistricting, because there was a census last year during COVID,
Yeah.
and now we have to redraw all the districts, and not just the congressional districts, but the state house, state senate, and also the school board. So that's what we're going to do in a special session next month, and that's going to be controversial. No matter what we do, someone's not going to like it, and
Sure.
they're all going to say we're all corrupt and we're all self-dealing and everything else, which that hasn't been my experience, but to each their own. Some people.
Sure.
Are very cynical, and I think on the federal level there's cause, and I'm not saying there's no cause on the state level, but what I see in my colleagues is a bunch of imperfect people trying to do their best.
Sure.
And like I said, they're constantly changing. But
Yeah.
so that's a big issue right now. Growth is a big issue. Affordable housing has been,
Oh, yeah.
we never talked about
man.
for affordable housing my first 6 or 7 years in the legislature, and now that's all we talk about. We didn't talk about homelessness a lot in my first 5 years, and now we're dealing with homelessness issues every year. Mental health has become, mental health treatment has become a really big deal, and there's probably 30 other issues I'm not thinking of right now, but a lot of issues just come back every year, like education funding. So, I mean, we dealt with critical race theory in May. There's two legislators in the House. It's always the House who want to audit our election from 2020 because they think that, there was massive voter fraud in Utah, even though Trump won Utah by 21% and all of the Republicans in Salt Lake County won the close races, like Ben McAdams lost to Burgess Owens, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that,
there are people wanting to audit.
Oh yeah. We had a hearing on that last week on a committee that I chair. Yeah.
It's over, man.
It's never dull. It's never
That's
dull,
crazy.
Yeah. It's over.
I mean, you have so many things
and just so you know, in every state, it's not unlike that, but in Utah, so after you have an election, there's something called a canvass. That's when everybody thinks it's official the night of or the next day, but they do a canvass about 3 weeks after the election. And that's when like the elected officials vote to accept the results. You've got like 2 weeks to sue after that canvass, and then it's done. The statute of limitations for a election controversy is like 2 weeks after the canvass.
Wow.
So you can't pop up 10 months later and say, now we want to reopen.
Yeah, you can't
because
do that.
Life goes on. It's like the river flowing by. If you missed a fish, at the cabin 3 weeks ago, you don't get to call that fish back. It's like you missed it. You missed.
Yeah. And it's probably pretty unlikely that even happened anyway.
Yeah. I
think voting is one of the things that I was
Utah. I mean, there's never ever been a perfect election in the history of Utah or any other state, and there never will be. So are there irregularities?
Well,
yes.
I mean, when you're dealing with millions of votes,
is it widespread fraud that would change the results? No. I mean, we're talking tens of ballots here, maybe 100 ballots there. And the other thing that I think it's fun to tell people, and you may not know this, maybe you do, we don't have a statewide election in Utah. Okay. So we elected a new governor last year. We did not have a statewide election. You're saying, what are you talking about? Yes, we did. No, we had 29 county elections. Okay. And I say that for a reason, because if you're going to hack an election, you have to do it county by county. And in this country, I think we have about 2,800 counties, and we don't have national elections for president. We have 2,800 or so county elections.
Oh, wow.
You all remember Broward County with the hanging chads with Bush versus Gore. Maybe you don't remember.
I don't know. I probably wasn't paying attention to politics.
And so elections are done nationwide on the county level. And so when Spencer Cox was elected governor, it was the result of 29 separate county elections.
Interesting.
And the reason I say that is, and we do have a state elections office, and that's headed up by the lieutenant governor. But all they're doing is really supervising and setting rules and things for the 29 independently elected county clerks. And what's interesting about asking for an audit in Utah is outside of Salt Lake County, almost all of our county clerks are Republicans. So you'd have to believe that all of these Republicans were in on this massive voter
okay.
fraud.
So they're introducing bills to audit Utah for like Trump or something.
Well, yeah, because
that's crazy.
Because Trump has convinced a certain element of our society that there was this widespread, massive voter fraud. The other thing I'll tell you real quickly, I don't want to spend the whole podcast on this. None of our machines are connected to the internet. So, we do use Dominion machines in Salt Lake County, which have been vilified, but they're not connected to the internet. So if you're going to hack that machine, you're going to have to break in to the elections office and do it machine by machine. There's no computer program that's going to hack those machines.
Interesting.
I mean, that you could do online.
You could do online.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. That's funny. So that's also bananas. And you're just like, do you think there should be, so what does it take to get elected to the Senate?
You have to be really lucky.
Isn't there signatures as well?
Well, okay. So interesting. You should ask. So there weren't signatures when I was first elected, but that's a bill that the legislature passed. It's called
to collect.
To have a dual path. So when I first ran, you had to go to a convention for your political party, and then possibly to a primary, and then to the general election in November. And now you can bypass the convention by collecting enough signatures, or you can do both. And we've had almost nobody bypass the convention. So what people do is they collect signatures and they go to the convention, just as kind of a belts and suspenders approach.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I was looking at that. Like I told you when I was like looking, I was like, oh, you got to get a bunch of signatures.
And I don't think that applies to North Salt Lake City Council. I think you can just walk
I think you can in North Salt Lake, but I was looking at
higher.
I was looking at some
level.
of these positions and I was like, this is crazy.
Yeah. And you mentioned the guy running for governor that I hadn't heard of, but let me just tell you, I wish every politician would start off on the city council level. That's what I did. And probably 20% of our legislature has served on city councils, and some have served as mayors. Like Jerry Stevenson was mayor of Layton for 8 years, and now he's in the Senate with me. But I think the best preparation for serving in the legislature is to serve on a city council. And so many people, they show up and they want to start at the top. People run for U.S. Senate who've never been elected before. And, Mike Lee did that. He'd never been elected before and he won. In fact, Bob Bennett did too. And Mitt Romney had been a governor, but in a different state. But and that's nice. But it's, for those of us that aren't the rich and famous, you got to start somewhere, and city council is the best place. So I was like, you know what, I'm just going to go back to giving my thoughts on, because I don't really want to run. And what you ought to do is you ought to start meeting city council members on your own terms, and let them know, hey, if there's a vacancy on the planning commission, I'd love to be considered for that. Because the planning commission is kind of like an advisory body to the city council, and they hear a lot of issues. It's really boring, but you learn a lot. You learn a lot, and you know stuff that your neighbors don't know, because you kind of know what's coming next year.
Oh, that's cool.
In terms of development and stuff.
You know what? Let me ask you this. Because you mentioned a few issues that were going on with Utah, and you could have mentioned 30 more. What does it take to get to the top of the plate? Because I see a lot of these things. So I'm going to take one for example, and I'll say this because I said it anyway. But like I'm not affiliated with any party. I just don't. I just don't.
No, that's okay.
Yeah. And because I'm like. When I hear some Democrat things, I'm like, okay, that's a really good idea. And I hear some Republican things. I'm like, okay, that's cool. And then I hear some of both sides, and I'm like, you both sound like that doesn't resonate with me, right? That both sounds crazy. So
I think we're all like that.
Yeah, okay, which is fair. And so when I'm looking at when I'm talking about things like, okay, so Utah is legal for like medical marijuana. We're on the west side of the country. A lot of states around us have recreationalized it, or at least decriminalized it. And so I'm like, I would like to push for that. I call myself an advocate, but not a partaker.
Sure.
But it feels like, just from our conversation, that to get to like the forefront, you have to have enough people like in the state worried about it.
Yeah, I think that's true. And we,
So is it really just like a population thing?
Yeah, and sometimes it's a crisis, like that Lauren McCluskey was killed 3 years ago at the University of Utah, and that spurred some legislation. She was the track star that she had an ex-boyfriend that murdered her.
Oh, that's right. And it was like the park was right up there where she got taken, right?
No, that's another girl from the University of Utah.
Oh crap, man.
Yeah. So we're you guys can't see us in Radio Land or Podcast Land, but we're now all pointing towards Hatch Park in North Salt Lake.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But unfortunately, that was another girl.
That was
her name escaped me, and yes, she was the guy that. She met him through the Sugar Daddy app, and then he burned her body afterwards. But Lauren McCluskey was shot by a guy she'd met in a bar and dated for a few times.
Okay.
But in any event, sometimes there's like a big crisis event. Sometimes there's like a newspaper story that a lot of people respond to. Sometimes, just the economy shifts, like with the affordable housing. I mean,
yeah, that happened quick.
Yeah. I mean, one of my sons bought a house 2 years ago, and it's gone up like $100,000 in value. And he's like 24 years old,
Yeah. Well, same with my house. Yeah. I was like, this is crazy.
Which is great for him. But then his little brother, I don't know how he's ever going to buy a house.
Yeah, exactly.
And then he has a little sister. So, so some things it's just a circumstance, other things are new opportunities. And, the inland port, I don't know if you've heard of the inland port, but you know about the shipping container crisis that we have going on in Long Beach with all these things.
They're backed up like miles. Right?
Yeah. Oh, so the idea of the inland port, which we first passed legislation on almost 5 years ago, was that when these containers, a lot of these containers, even before this current, I'm going to call it the Biden crisis because I'm a Republican, before this current crisis started, a lot of those containers would sit there in Long Beach or wherever, Seattle or, San Diego, for a month or two before they'd be opened and inspected by customs. So the idea of an inland port, and they do this on the east, in the eastern U.S., but we don't have one in the West, is these containers would come off the ship, they get put on a train the next day, and they'd be in Salt Lake, a few hours later, and they would be opened here by customs for the first time. And there's a lot of synergy because the inland port's going to be out by the new prison, which is west of the airport. And so we've got I-80, we've got I-15, we've got the airport, we've got the train lines, Union Pacific train lines.
Yeah.
And we're about within a 1 day's drive of Denver and Phoenix and even Seattle you can get to in a day.
Or maybe even Los Angeles.
Well, yeah, but it would make sense to ship it to here and then go back to
I see what you're saying. Okay.
But, it would make sense to ship it here and then have it forwarded to like Denver, for example.
Okay.
And so we've been trying to get this inland port off the ground because it'll create jobs and synergy here in Utah and also speed up this logistical shipping, bottleneck. And it's never been worse than it is now. But this is going to throw you for a loop. Do you want to know what issue I've gotten more emails on this year than any other issue in the state?
What?
Whether we should change the name of Dixie State.
Really?
Yes.
You've got names? You got emails about
thousands and thousands of emails.
But like we're in Salt Lake.
Because it's the legislature that has the final say. So today, the day that we're recording, today the Board of Trustees for Dixie State University voted to change the name to Utah Technical College or University. I think in any event, and so the legislature will vote on that probably next month in our special session would be my guess. But yeah, the people in Washington County, they don't want to change the name.
That's St. George County. Yeah.
Well,
not St. George County. It's St. George, and
of course, they used the Confederate flag. They say, oh, it's not race. There's no racial connotations, but they used to have the Confederate flag as kind of like their school symbol, and my wife's a Dixie State grad, and she doesn't think the name should change either. But the most heart-wrenching thing, and there's good arguments on both sides. Sure. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to vote to change the name because I think it's not a matter of if. It's just like Bountiful Braves,
just change it.
We've kind of lost the culture war there.
Sure.
But the most heartening emails I get is from graduates of Dixie State, who are interviewing in the South, and they're like, every single interview they ask me about the name of my college, and it's embarrassing, because Dixie, even the Dixie Chicks drop Dixie.
Yeah, they're
just
the chicks
now.
Yeah.
And
I get it.
Post George Floyd, everything's become I think we're trying to be more sensitive to some racial issues. And so the people in Washington County feel offended because they're like, well, we're not racist. And if you change the name, then it's kind of evidence that we were racist. And I don't think they're racist down there. I just think
I just think it's an old, I just think it's an old college name.
And I'll tell you what really frustrates me is we're kind of, through the culture wars, we're kind of being forced to change the name of Dixie State. But have you ever heard of a university back east called Yale?
Yeah.
Yeah. You've heard of Yale?
Yale University. Yeah.
Do you know who Mr. Yale was?
No.
Nobody talks about this. He wasn't just a slave owner. He was a slave trader. He shipped them in. Okay.
Whoa.
Nobody says Yale has to change their name.
Really?
Yeah.
Ben, look that up.
No, it's true. I don't mix
I believe you.
Yeah.
I just want to see because that's crazy.
It's such a double standard though. So on one hand, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to vote to change the name of Dixie State. On the other hand, I just wish things could be intellectually honest and consistent, but they never have been in the
I understand. Yeah, I understand. I think when you're talking about these kinds of issues, you just got to take the steps that you can. Like, I served a mission in St. George. Oh, okay. I'm originally from Iowa, so that's why I asked him.
Okay.
Ben's family, my wife, and Ben and their family lived in Illinois for a long time. They lived in Nauvoo.
Okay.
They're from there.
Yeah. I was in the pageant 2 years as a teenager.
Oh, really?
When they had a pageant. So
yeah. Well, we probably saw you because we were there all the time. So the side note, we worked concessions.
Oh, okay.
All the time.
Yeah.
Like that was how we raised money
old,
for
though. So I was in the pageant like in the 70s. So before you were born.
Okay. That's fair. But I think when you're talking about this stuff, because like I served down there, Dixie State, we served on the campus.
Yeah.
We did all that stuff. And I totally understand where people are coming from. Like, cause the name of a college is a big deal.
Yeah.
And
it's on your resume for the rest of your life.
Yeah. So just change it.
Yeah. We're going to change it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, I think it's better to than to not.
Yeah. But just like people in Bountiful, they don't want to change the Braves.
Yeah. There was a big, I remember that, even in our house. Yeah.
And talk about double standards. The Atlanta Braves.
Yeah, still haven't done.
Are the Braves? So why do we have to change it in Utah?
The Atlanta Braves. What'd you find, Ben?
Nothing yet.
Oh,
what?
Nothing yet.
You're fact checking me on Mr. Yale.
I just want to see because I'm interested in these as well because I agree with you.
Yeah.
I think we should be
very long article.
Yeah.
I think
just type in Yale slave trader. It'll come up.
That's exactly what I'm searching.
Okay.
I think it's it's not that I don't believe you. I'm just because I'm interested in all these, it's like nuances. Funny that you got to do it over here, but then you don't do it over here. And then I find this article. I don't know, it's a swear word, but it's called F nuance, and it talks about just like this idea that if we nuance everything, we get lost in the nuance, right, of things. But I mean, for me, it's like you might as well just change the name because
we are.
Yeah. I know you are.
Can I rant a second about cancel culture?
Yeah.
So I get it. I mean, I don't want people to be racist. I don't consider myself racist. I don't know if I qualify as an anti-racist according to Ibram X. Kennedy. But here's the thing. We're all human. We all make mistakes. And the thing I hate the most about cancel culture is there's no room for forgiveness. Yeah. There's no room for someone learning to grow. Yeah. It's like, oh, you said this when you were 15, you tweeted this when you were 15 and now you're 30, now you're 25. Yeah. Well, you're canceled forever. Yeah, and I hate this. I hate where we are on that. Because, and I could give you some examples, but I don't want to do it. But if somebody made a mistake in their youth and they've learned from that, it's a good thing that they learned from it. Yeah. And they're probably not going to make that mistake again. But instead, it's kind of used as this gotcha, like, you're a racist because of this one tweet. We're going to ignore everything else you've done in your life. And we're just going to, this one tweet proves that you're a racist and you're always a racist. And that's so stupid. It's just so short-sighted.
I think, I do think that there is, because see, like, again, I don't think cancel culture should be a thing because the biggest reason is because we have these double standards. Yeah. We have these crazy, like you canceled him, but you didn't cancel him. Yeah. And my thing is like if you're going to do something like that, you better be consistent. Yeah.
Well, Dave Chappelle is dealing with this right now for his
Did you watch The Closer, by the way?
I did not watch it, but it's fascinating to watch because I think the question is, I think he thinks he's too big to be taken down, to be canceled. And he's probably right, but I'm not 100% sure.
Well, this is funny because if you watched he's recently put out a video. I love Dave Chappelle. Like I've done stand-up comedy a few times and I respect the art, and he's the greatest of all time without a doubt.
And grew up poor.
In Ohio and things like this, right? But if you watch that special, The Closer on Netflix, it's not even close to transphobic.
Yeah.
And that's what he said. He came out afterwards and he was like, I'll talk to the people of the transgender community.
If they watch my whole special.
They're like, if you watch the whole special,
I heard that,
and you meet me.
And he made 2 or 3 Jewish jokes in that same special.
He made fun of everyone.
And I don't hear any Jews complaining. And,
and I shared the video where he was on stage and he kind of defended himself in The Closer. And I was like,
why are we going back to the 90s and punishing comedians for something that was pretty damn funny in the 90s and nobody was offended by then?
Yeah.
It's just so weird. It's just so weird.
And you're talking about, what, did you find something?
I was just scratching my forehead, but the Yale guy was a slave trader. So
wow,
cha-ching.
Yeah, that's it. Good for you.
So I'm going to start the petition. We need to change the name of Yale. We'll change it to Connecticut Technical University. I'm just kidding.
There you go. But but that's the thing is like, my problem with the cancel culture is like you're not consistent.
No,
and that's my problem.
It's always a double standard.
Yeah.
And and I'll say this as a Republican, it's always a double standard against the conservatives. Yeah. It never goes the other way. Almost never goes the other way.
I agree. And I think some people are picked on because, well, Trump didn't do any Republican any favors.
Yeah.
I don't think.
I mean, I don't want to get too political, but Joe Biden, one of his former staffers came forward and said that he sexually assaulted her.
Yeah.
Kamala Harris said she believed her for two minutes and then she changed her mind and was his.
No, I remember that. I was like, what the heck? And then you have the Kavanaugh.
Yeah.
Justice Kavanaugh.
So Kavanaugh was allegedly happened when he was a teenager.
They raked him through the coals.
Yeah. For something. And by the way, that woman who accused Biden, and I don't know if she's insane or I don't know if we're supposed to believe all women until we didn't, right? I mean, but and I'm being a little bit facetious there, but there were several things back from 92, including her mom calling into the Larry King show on CNN and talking about it in 92.
Yeah.
Whereas there and the Kavanaugh accuser, there was nothing. Even her friends that said they were there said, no, I don't remember that. But it's just so weird. The double standard is just, I can't stand the hypocrisy.
Well, and that's a big, well, and when you talk about like, Trump, whatever you think about him, he had racist allegations against him. Joe Biden passed the 94 crime bill.
Yeah.
And Kamala Harris. And this is a fact. Kamala Harris knowingly put innocent people in jail and kept them in jail.
As Attorney General in California.
As attorney, and most of them were minorities for marijuana charges.
Yeah.
That's, by the way, it's totally legal in California.
Now it is.
Now.
Yeah.
Well, and we can talk. I'm not going to go into that.
And you just reminded me, I'm going to tell you something most people don't know. We have essentially decriminalized marijuana in Utah. People don't realize this because if you get pulled over on the way home from this and you've got some weed in your glove box,
sure,
you're going to get cited if you don't have a card. But if you go and get a card and then go back to court and show them your card, they're gonna drop the charges.
Oh wow.
We basically put that in the law. Nobody really knows about it.
Well, because my thing is like, why are you picking up somebody for weed? Like, I don't really.
Most cops today they won't even deal with that because they know you can just go get a card.
You can go get a card, and what are you gonna do? Because most of the things that I'm like, I don't think you should be driving high.
Yeah.
Just like with alcohol, right? Like,
I'm high on life.
Yeah, right. There you go. But I don't think you should be driving like intoxicated from weed or anything like that. But the stories that I've heard with it are like, you got some kid walking down the street, gets caught with a dime bag. It's like, are you going to put you're going to give that 16-year-old or whatever?
The war on drugs, right?
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah. And that gets me fired up because I'm not buying it.
And I think we're moving away from that as a state and a society, although the stupid Congress is so dysfunctional that it's still a federal offense. Even though the states have legalized it, it's still against federal law.
Yeah. Which, you got Joe Biden in there.
Yeah.
He was going to do everything. He didn't do it. Okay. I don't know. Well, the student loans thing, that's a big one. And they're passing that, what is that bill? for the debt ceiling.
They haven't passed it yet.
They haven't passed it yet, but it's not even student loans. Nothing about student loans. Is in there, from what I've read.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's easy to like I said, when you run for office, you can say anything you want.
Well, it's funny, and I understand your point of view as well. Like, I understand that where I'm coming from, I could just be talking out of my ass.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I could just be like, I have no clue what's going on.
Yeah.
But it kind of goes back to what I was talking about at the beginning of the podcast, which is like, I wish there was, and I understand that you can like watch these things, but maybe like some transcripts or some like show notes or something. Cause I just like to see transparency, when cause I remember when you had the medical marijuana bill in Utah and nobody knew what to believe.
Yeah.
That's how I felt. Like you had people on this side, you had people on this side.
Well, and you can go read it, but it's boring.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, you know what I mean? Is there somebody who can like
break it down,
break it down and just tell people what's going on? And, and cause lawyer language is just as hard to listen to as like doctor language.
What do you mean by that?
That's
I'm
what you know.
Personal. Just kidding.
Because it's semantics. You got words in there I've never even heard of. Because people, and I get why you got to do it. I get why semantics is important. Somebody's going to twist this and make it whatever they want. And if they set a precedence, now we got to.
Whereas the aforementioned plaintiff, hereby, I know what you're talking about.
I know. I've had to. Well, that contract that I send all my the guest.
I didn't read it.
Sure,
I just
sign it. Well, it's
a release for this podcast.
It's boilerplate. Yeah. But I remember reading it with the attorney who I'm drafted.
Apparently now you own my car because I didn't read it. So.
No, but I'm sitting down with him. I'm like, does it? I was like, I told you what I wanted it to say. Yeah. Will this say
work?
It?
Yeah.
He's like, yeah. I'm like, all right, just give it to me. And it's been good so far. But that's interesting. I think that's the biggest thing for me is just some kind of transparency, because I've been jaded by the news. Like, I'm certainly like, I'm not going to read anything. Yeah. I don't trust KSL. I don't trust Deseret News. I don't trust the Salt Lake Tribune. I don't trust Facebook. You know what I mean? I don't trust Fox 13. I just don't because I'm a sales guy.
Yeah. So let me tell you, because I'm someone that's sometimes interviewed in the news, sometimes in the news.
Okay.
So and let me just give you a couple thoughts. So number one, I've never been misquoted, and I mean sometimes they'll take exactly what I said word for word, but if you leave out what you said afterwards.
Sure.
And this happened to Candace Owens, who's from the Daily Wire. She was talking about we need to evade Australia, and she said, "Of course, I speak in jest." And then the mainstream media ran with it and left out, "Of course, this is in jest." So stuff like that just ticks me off. But I think it's important to know that everyone has a bias. So the Salt Lake Tribune has a bias, and the thing that bothers me. I think is, I just mentioned the Daily Wire, which is, Ben Shapiro's outfit. Yeah. They don't pretend like they're not conservative and pro-libertarian.
Yeah. Which is fine.
But CNN pretends like they're completely neutral, and they're not. Yeah. And so, the companies that rank media, they'll actually score the Daily Wire and someone like Breitbart, who I don't really watch. They'll actually discount them. They'll say, "Oh, well, you're biased, and so we're going to give you a lower rating." CNN is biased, not as biased as MSNBC, and Fox News is biased. So they're all biased, and I think if you accept that, it's fine. I'll often listen to NPR, and then I'll listen to a conservative podcast, and I'll do both because I figure. Neither of them are overtly lying, but there's different nuances.
But it's not what you say; it's how you say it.
Yeah,
because we're sales guys.
Here's my challenge to you and your podcast listeners: try to get outside your bubble. I mean, I'm a Republican. Yeah. I'm and I will force myself to listen to NPR because I know that they're going to take the liberal slant on everything, and I enjoy NPR. But I do that purposefully, so I'm not just getting. And by the way, I never personally watch Fox News. Now I do listen to some podcasts that are kind of more right wing, but I think part of our problem in this society is this cocooning that I mentioned earlier. Okay. We all need to take steps to try to, if you're a liberal, watch Fox News every once in a while and see,
and just get the other side.
Just to see the other side, because none of these sources are overtly lying to you. what they're doing is they're reporting it with their slant.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I agree.
when Donald Trump told a fib, it was headline news. Joe Biden has told several fibs, verifiable fibs, and they don't report it.
Oh yeah, Joe Biden's the least covered president.
Well, no, but they cover him. But they say, "Oh, look at him with his dog," and "Oh, his wife has a PhD."
Oh, sorry, not covered. I meant criticized.
Yeah,
probably the least criticized.
I mean, he went on in August with George Stephanopoulos and said not one of the military advisors, warned against this withdrawal. That was a blatant falsehood. And we now have the military advisors testifying under oath to Congress saying, yes, here's the memo I sent. And yes, I told the president, that there was a risk.
To do this, yeah.
And so, and I'm sorry, most politicians lie, especially on the federal level. Donald Trump lied. And you might say, and I'm going to be a little bit partisan here, you might say Joe Biden wasn't lying because he can't remember what he said or what was said to him. And that may be true. And that's a bigger problem, right? So
you can say whatever you want I agree with you. In fact, one of my favorite videos is this guy and the question is up at the top and it says tell me you're not Republican or Democrat without telling me you're not Republican or Democrat.
Yeah.
And he pans the video and is his whole library is right here.
Uh-huh.
Right. Cause you read and that's what happened to me. I started reading, I wanted to learn more about affordable housing. So I picked up a couple books, Evicted was one of them.
That's great.
Cause it's just, when you get into this mindset of it's capitalism.
Yeah.
And I'm well, it's a lot more gray than just letting people, you know what I mean? It's a lot more gray than this free market idea.
Yeah.
Because we've let so many things go unchecked.
One of my favorite things this fall has been the "Let's Go Brandon."
Oh yeah,
because we all know what the chant really was, and it's not just at the race state; it's been all over the country, including in blue states. If that had happened to Donald Trump, there's no way the media would have said, "Oh no, they're really chanting something else."
Right. Well, yeah, and so that's my thing is and then the other thing is I don't buy either side, that side, and I am frustrated with it, and the reason I'm frustrated with it is because why do we have to have two? I posted this on Facebook one time.
Yeah.
And I was I don't want either of them.
Yeah.
I didn't want Trump or Hillary.
Yeah.
I didn't want Trump or Biden. I didn't want Obama or
you and me both.
Yeah. I was dude, what? I voted for Joe Jorgensen because I was just because that was funny.
Yeah.
This was another thing that was funny to me was everybody was feminist when Hillary was running.
Yeah.
And they were and I heard people say we don't even have a girl running for president.
Yeah.
I'm yes, we do.
Yeah.
We do actually.
Yeah.
And I voted for her.
Yeah.
And why isn't this headline news?
Yeah.
Because she's not in your party. She's not voting against you or whatever. Right. Or she's not in your party or she's not in the opposite party. That's what I'm talking about it.
For sure.
And I'm that's frustrating.
And the what you've just articulated very well is why the confidence and the trust in the establishment mainstream media is now at an all-time low, and I don't see them rebounding.
Yeah.
People don't believe what they're being told, and in many instances they probably shouldn't.
Well, yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying is
and again, I don't think they're reporting lies. I think they're just it's like if you have a yellow highlighter and you're just highlighting the parts that you like.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. What's up, man?
The max battery's low.
Oh, okay. Well, you know what? Actually, we probably need to wrap up anyway.
It up.
So, I appreciate it.
Yeah,
I'm sure we could have talked longer.
Great discussion.
But I'm grateful that you came on. I'm grateful that we had as honest of a conversation as we could, because some of my friends were hey, are you going to ask him hard questions? And I was well, look, here's the deal.
Oh, you can ask me hard questions.
I know. And I threw out some ones that I'm not going to ask hard questions because of what we talked about at the beginning is I felt like I asked some pretty hard ones, with marijuana. I felt like I asked them with transparency.
Yeah.
But I also understand that it's not just black and white. It's well, if we all wanted marijuana, why don't you just pass it?
50 Shades of Gray, right?
Yeah. All right, then. Cool, man. But you know what I mean? Because it's just, I know it's a lot more complicated than that. You can't just, and you got so many things that are up at the front. I would, even though I'm a huge advocate for marijuana, I would probably put affordable housing before I put marijuana.
Well, and I think you should.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's why it's Are you going to get them?
Well, especially because the people in chronic pain, we've already given them a path, right? With the medical card.
And it's very easy to get a medical card.
Let me just say this. When you read something in the Tribune about the legislature that makes us look absolutely foolish, there's probably another side to that story, because
the Tribune.
We're not as dumb as we look. We're also not that smart. We do make mistakes, but usually there's, when most people will call me and say, tell me the rest of the story, and I do, and they're like, oh, that totally makes sense. So
yeah, exactly.
Give us a little bit of credit.
Yeah. Or just talk, right?
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, hey, thank you so much for joining. And I really appreciate our conversation.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on.
Good, Ben.